Well, thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate you taking this time to chat with us about Luminosity, Stonington's latest exhibition, October and November, focused on Northwest Coast native glass art. And today we have Preston Singletary, Raven Skyriver, and Dan Friday with us. And we'll be talking more about their amazing work, body of work that they've created for this exhibition and some previous work as well. Just a little bit about Stonington Gallery. We exhibit a collection of contemporary masterworks from the Pacific Northwest and Alaska. Our artists work in many media, styles, and traditions, and we're at the forefront of Pacific Northwest culture and art. We offer works at all price points and in all media. And we place a special emphasis on works in glass by contemporary Indigenous artists, such as Raven Skyriver, Preston Singletary, Dan Friday, and Marvin Oliver, and many others. And my name is Aista Manfredini, and I'm the marketing coordinator who will be leading today's panel discussion. And we'll also have Michelle Ebert, who's our gallery assistant, who will be assisting us with tech today as well. And to start off, I'll go ahead and introduce you, Preston. Preston Singletary creates works in glass, bronze, and on paper. Singletary uses intricate Northwest Coast formline design to render traditional objects and shamanic tools, woven hats and baskets, and mythical characters in the glass. Preston is known for his collaborations with Indigenous artists from around the world. And in Stonington's latest exhibition, Luminosity, he continues his collaborative creations with master glassblower, Raven Skyriver. And next we have Raven Skyriver, who blows in hot sculpt glass marine animals from oceans and river systems that are threatened by pollution, ocean acidification, and overfishing. Raven uses the techniques he has learned from blowing with William Morris and other glass luminaries to render lifelike creatures, giving us eye-to-eye encounters with deep sea creatures we don't often see. In Luminosity, he presents several new creatures in addition to a few made in collaboration with Preston. And we also have today Dan Friday, who is inspired by the material culture of the Lummi people, the gear with which they reef net fish, one of the world's oldest and most sustainable salmon fishing techniques, the totem poles carved by his great-grandfather, Joseph R. Hilaire, and the cedar bark woven baskets and goat fur blankets of the great Lummi weavers. So thank you all again for being here today. It's a pleasure to have you, and thanks so much for making the time. We'll go ahead and get started with a couple questions for Preston. And we're going to chat a little bit about what inspired you to create these glass baskets. We have the Indian Curio shelf, and we're just curious what the inspiration came from. If you can chat more about that.
Yeah, the inspiration, came from, the baskets themselves. I've spent a lot of time early on trying to recreate certain traditional objects, Tlingit objects in glass in various ways, from the hat forms to spoons and rattles, and the baskets are just another part of that. So they when I first started doing them, I was always, my first thought was to make them look like baskets, make them look these earth tone colors with beiges and browns and things like that. And then I did that for a good long while. And then I thought, well, why am I limiting myself to just working with these, these muted tones? And so I started to use other colors. And so throughout the exhibition, the collection that is at Stonington, you can see a really broad variety of colors. And basically they are all inspired by traditional designs that I've studied through just looking at books and actually looking and talking about these baskets with weavers. And so these designs are taken from books that I see, historical books about basketry, and like the whole idea of the Indian Curio shops. That's why I gave it the title Indian Curio Shelf. So I feel like these pieces look good together, and they kind of relate to each other, or I don't know, they look good in combinations. So I'll look for different colors that kind of, in my eye, look complementary and create a nice variety. That's where I started. That was my first inspiration around that.
They're really beautiful. I love the color palette. It looks fantastic together. So thank you for sharing that. Raven, I have a question for you. So your artwork is inspired by nature and native animals in the Pacific Northwest coast. Can you tell us more about your inspiration for Thrasher, the shark sculpture?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. I actually was really intrigued by the Thresher form because it's just so exaggerated, the tail. I mean, I could have even exaggerated the tail more and it would have been truer to form as far as the proportions of the shark go. But so it was actually something that I was really interested in making for some time, and I was trying to kind of pick my brain on like how I would go about doing that, because it's tricky with that long tail fin to kind of navigate the getting in and out of the furnace and stuff. So and then I got these really excellent books that are fishes of the Salish Sea, which is three books that come together. And it has plates for all the different fish, and it catalogs all the fish in the Salish Sea. And come to find out, there's Thresher here too, which I didn't even know. So it really is fascinating what swims through these waters that surround us, and what you don't even know is there. I mean, there's a crazy variety of color and shape. But I just found that really interesting that the Thresher was here in the Puget Sound and the greater area. And so when I was up at Pilchuck Glass School, I decided I would go ahead and try it when there was lots of help and the facility that would accommodate the piece. So so I did that this summer during my residency up at Pilchuck for it was a 10-day residency with family sessions. So my wife Kelly was there, who's also a glass artist, and then a couple other people, Granite and Ginny and Sasha and Mikey and some other people. So I had lots of hands to help, and went ahead and decided to try and make that piece, and I'm really happy with how it came out. But yeah, that's kind of the origin story of where that came from. So
awesome. It's beautiful, and I'm just so fascinated by how the fins were like attached to the body. Yeah, it's just a really gorgeous piece. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Dan, I have a question next for you. So can you talk about what inspired you to use bears and anchors in your glass work? We often see that in a lot of the work that you create.
Yeah, I definitely make a lot of bears. Bears, it's different than the northern style, but our family is a bear family. You mentioned the Lummi people, and it's actually Weklami. You know, that's kind of the more common term is Lummi, but it's Weklami, or people of the sea, or Lahotamish people. And like you said, my grandfather Joseph Raymond Hilaire, or Quoquoit, is his father Frank Hilaire, or Hitlak, is kind of the leader of our house in a lot of ways, or the children of the setting sun. And we are the children of the setting sun are like the bear family, and so there's definitely a lot of bears in my family.
Preston, my next question for you is, how do you determine the designs of your baskets? Everyone always asks those stories behind, the specific designs, and I'm curious if you could talk more about that.
Yeah, I mean, the baskets, I do a lot of research about these basket designs through books that I find. I've also worked with other, some weavers, and, learned about the meanings of the designs. some of them are traditional and some of them were probably the ones that I was inspired by were probably made for trade, at the turn of the century. The earliest baskets I understand were very small, unless it was maybe like a clam basket, something utilitarian. But these smaller ones are sort of medium, small, medium, slightly larger. I think a lot of them that we look at were made for tourist trade, and so in some cases they might have been inspired by other patterns that the weavers might have been exposed to, like these Greek key patterns. And then in some cases they represent waves, and sometimes they represent mountains, or there's triangles or sort of like shark teeth. Then you have flock of geese, and you have ravens, footprints. You've got all kinds of different patterns that have been given or designated for a basket design. And so working with the designs is always there's a lot of math involved, trying to figure out how to split up the circumference of the piece. And so that's why these pieces are really fun and challenging at the same time, to sort of get that design to wrap around in a mathematic way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I am just fascinated by how you go about that. Is it like what do you use to actually,
Well, I basically
the actual patterns
measure the circumference and create sort of grid lines that are penciled in. And once I wrap this a vinyl tape around it, then I can, I have different, a grid that I'll set the piece on, and I'll mark up, in division to divide up the space, and then I'll kind of draw and connect the lines, as you can imagine, based on that, the division of the space. And then the other detail, which haven't talked about much, is the texture of those baskets are basically a very thin slitted vinyl tape that is hand applied to the baskets over the geometric patterns, and then it's blasted in different stages to create kind of mimic the weaving pattern. And it's my good friend Marcus Ammerman refers to a process like this, the power of tedium, this tedious process that creates it gives it, feels like there's a lot of work that has gone into it, and that has
totally,
there has been a lot of work, but it's kind of I don't know, reduced by the blasting process, and so that's where you get that active surface pattern.
awesome. That's really cool. Thank you. Raven, tell us about your creative process with each glass artwork. Is your process similar or different for each piece, from conception of an idea to the finished product?
I'd say it varies. I mean, like some of the other pieces that I've made are like, I feel like the Thresher to me is more of a form study, and so some things I pick as something, as a challenge to try to create the form and proportion and all the different elements that come together to make the piece, and that is so much is really process oriented. For me. Like I'm moving towards that as a challenge to try to see if I can get the form and the shape and the proportion as close as I can. And then other things like the salmon, I think, are more heart-based and more kind of based in my informed more by my upbringing and by my life here in the Pacific Northwest, and just that connection to the salmon, and also just kind of the historical and spiritual significance of the salmon amongst like all of the native people of the Northwest coast. So so that's something that's a little bit more, maybe more deeply spiritual to me, and I've made enough of them so that it's not as much about the process, it's more about the end product. But I guess both of those things play into each piece. But yeah, I'm always I think in every piece I make, I'm just looking at trying to convey the form and the proportion in a realistic way that's pleasing to your eye, and then if I can do that, then I can take artistic license as far as color and maybe some other the way that I display them or whatever. But the form and proportion is really important to me, because I think that when you look at something, whether you know exactly what a salmon looks like or not, you can tell if it's wrong. You couldn't necessarily say if it's right, but your eye can always tell if it's wrong. So the challenge for me is to just be able to get it close enough to where your eye fills in the blanks, and then or your mind fills in for you the blanks, because the form is realistic enough that it translates.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that. Dan, are you here with us?
I'm here.
Awesome. Yay.
Sorry, technical difficulties at Fort Friday.
That's okay. And just so you know, we can't see you, if that's okay.
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 Maybe that's a good thing.
Did you want to share more about your inspiration behind the bears and the anchors before we move on to the next question?
I don't know where it cut off, but I'm definitely, those are two things that are definitely hit on. A lot of the work, the series, the anchors kind of really go hand in hand with the salmon. And again, just like Raven was saying about the salmon, like if you live here in the Salish Sea or the Pacific Northwest, and just trying to be part of that life cycle, that's part of the life cycle that we all share. The salmon coming and ebbing and flowing and returning every year. And my family, so much of our life and livelihoods are kind of built around it up at Lummi. The way the salmon come in right now is an epic pink year, and everybody's smoking away, and salmon's for sale, and it's not the same as it was, but it definitely still mirrors that, like the harvest, it's just part of if you're in tune with the turning of the tide around here, it's hard to ignore the return of the salmon.
Totally. Yeah, that makes sense. And then the anchor specifically, does that have a story behind it?
Yeah, those are part of the Swallow story, and that's more about like reef net fishing. And reef net fishing originated here in the Salish Sea, particularly in the Strait Salish with the Weklami and Saanich people, or Saanich people. And it has I don't know if you can see, like my exhibition at the Museum of Northwest Art has been extended again, and it will go through until December. But I have one of the Schwallas. I don't know if you guys have any pictures of that in Q, but at the end of the Schwalla, there's a big hoop, a willow branch hoop, and that's where the chief of the salmon people, or the tip of the spear, is allowed to escape and continue up on his journey and procreate. And just that sort of reverence for the salmon that the people around here have, to have a built-in mechanism of conservation in their way of harvesting is just one of those things I like to point out when we're out here. I make a living off salmon in a different way than all my cousins, but that story be told. And I feel like You know, people argue about what they see about global warming, but I can tell you what I can see with my own two eyes is just the amount of like pollution that is out there, or the dwindling returns and things like that. Those are things I can see with my own two eyes, and I can speak to that. And you know, I just hope with that work that I can bring those messages to the forefront, and at the same time kind of honor the beauty of the salmon and the people. And so the reef nets by themselves, the Schwalla anchors, you know, that's something that they didn't really know too much about. You know, just how vast the reef netting system was in the Puget Sound and Salish Sea and up into the Georgia Strait. But as they've gone excavating underwater now, they can find these massive reef net sites, just age old, handed down from family to family. And the record of them is in these anchors that are just piled in mass on the floor of the sound and the sea. And it really just kind of verifies where we've already known just where these sites were. You know, Lopez, Cherry Point, anywhere in the islands. The Lummi people, the Hakamish people are actually from the San Juan Islands. You know, English Camp is built on the original Lummi village on San Juan Island.
Wow, I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing. That was really fascinating.
Yeah, most people don't. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Preston, so next I'd like to chat a little bit about Descendent. So you and Raven both collaborated on this piece recently. Could you tell us about your collaborative process together, and what or who inspired you, and walk us through the creation of this piece from conception to the finished artwork? I know that's a lot, but both of you are welcome to chime in on this one. But we really just want to hear about your process and, you know, what inspired it, the process of working together, and how that felt to have completed this majestic piece.
You're on mute,
There
Preston.
you go. Sorry. Yeah, I just realized that. I spent a fair amount of time. I often do a collaboration show once a year or every other year, something like that, with a different Indigenous artist, or collaborate with different people, not always Indigenous artists. But anyways, of course, I was always, in awe of Raven. And I met Raven when he was quite young, maybe a teenager. And then when he got involved with glass, he kind of landed at the Pilchuck campus and started working with William Morris and developing all this great skill. And it's just amazing to see how he's, run with that and really kind of pioneered his own way of working and his own style with these whales and sea life and stuff. And so anyway, I don't even remember how we just maybe had a conversation and said we wanted to, maybe I should put some design work on some of his work, his traditional stuff that he does regularly. So I was really intrigued with the possibility of, what would I do on his work and how would it look? And so, of course, being another Tlingit tribal member, I mean, it was, I thought it was a brilliant idea to join forces and make these pieces. So, by working with other people, I learned so much about, motivations, how do we as Native people create work for, the current market. In the old days, a lot of the work that we would do would be for our community, and now we're more or less forced to go to the commercial market. And so by working in this way, it's really exciting to have these as like a canvas to work on, and trying to make it look, traditional designs. And yeah, it's really been a lot of fun and a challenge, so oftentimes we'll work together and make these pieces together in some hot shop, mine or elsewhere, and then we'll take it and or I'll take it, and with my team we'll sort of work on the design and sandblasting. So it's basically a sandblasting process, carving through one layer of color to expose the color underneath, and that's how you get that result. And so anyway, Raven
Yeah,
probably has
gorgeous.
thoughts and feelings about that too, the work that we do together.
Yeah, no, totally. It's been super rewarding and just awesome to work with Preston, and I'm a big admirer of his work, and being a native artist, my artwork is not necessarily like readily indicative of native art if you look at it, but it is because I make it. But so much of my focus has been on native species and and what the environment holds and how we treat that, and what our conservation and preservation looks like of those spaces and of those creatures. And it's just kind of it's mutually beneficial if we take care of those things. And so but for me it's really awesome to have I say that it's kind of like the native species meeting the native design, so it's just kind of like a really nice combination of those two things, and just having the formline design on this canvas, which is the whales and salmon and other life forms from the native species around here. It just I feel like it flows really well, and it just really comes together and makes something completely unique and different.
Definitely.
So for me it's obviously something I could never do on my own, and it's super rewarding just to see the finished product and how different it is, because I haven't seen anything like it before. So and that's really the beauty of collaboration. I mean, I think Glass has done a really good job, especially lately, with just different people collaborating, and it's like it's always a give and take, and it's something where you have to relinquish some of your control. A lot of artists are very controlling of their process and stuff for a good reason, and but it does end up creating a finished piece that is something completely unique, because it's just not something you would do as a solo artist. A lot of times if we make the piece and then the exterior colors on the surface, then Preston will then take it and sandblast it, and then it has a little bit more of a matte finish. But in this instance, we made the body, and then Preston sandblasted it, and then we picked it back up, and that's why it has that shiny surface to it, because it's been picked up and then the fins are put on and then it's fire polished. So it's just a technical aspect to it, but it definitely makes it a little bit more harrowing when you have all that work into the piece and then you have to rework it hot again, because like the mother there, I don't know, she's probably 34 or 36 inches or something like that, so it's a big piece of glass to pick back up out of the oven. So yeah, the technical challenges abound, but I think I could speak for all of us just saying that that's part of the part of what keeps us coming back to glass, is just that it's always challenging and there's always room to learn things. So glass is a good teacher, and it's fun to work collaboratively. Yeah,
lots of patience, I imagine.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. I will actually ask your next question, Raven. So you and artist Kelly O'Dell collaborated on the piece called Medusa. Can you tell us about your collaborative process together and what or who inspired you? And same, if you could just walk us through the creation of this piece and what that looked like for you.
Sure. Yeah. So again, working collaboratively, as I was saying before, is just always rewarding, because you're going to get a product, something in the end that you wouldn't have made on your own. So a lot of Kelly Odell's work is also kind of inspired by the marine environment, and she is also really interested in extinction and impermanence and permanence, and our perception of all of that. So she makes a lot of these ammonite shells, which is like a fossilized cephalopod, and it's curled on itself, this shell in this spiral form. And so we kind of joined our two aesthetics, and I made the kind of the soft tentacles, and she made the shell form, and we combined those things together to make the Nautilus, which is kind of like a living fossil. It's something that still exists, but just the variety of biodiversity in the ocean is endless. So when we saw some of these in an aquarium, so super interesting creature. So we just thought we'd try that, and it's something we've tried before, but again, we're always trying to just better our work and refine technique and stuff. So this is a really fun piece that we put together here in our studio. So we just finished building a studio here on Lopez Island, and so we're just starting to make work out of it. So this piece was made here.
Very cool. I love how translucent the tentacles are. Really beautiful. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Dan, I have a question for you. So your latest exhibition at the Museum of Northwest Art entails a variety of vibrant blown glass salmon, like you mentioned earlier. Could you talk about the significance of the salmon motif in your glass artwork? And I know you touched a little bit about that, but what specifically about this wall of salmon spoke to you, or what inspired that?
Well, I just really, when it was in a museum and it was such a big space, I just really wanted to get like a school of salmon, kind of the whole, I wanted to represent more than just the singular one on the, just, you've got so much space, and the salmon kind of is in conjunction with the big schwalla, or the big reef net in the atrium as you walk in, and they kind of guide you through the exhibit. It kind of comes as it comes around the corner, that it starts, and there's like a river net system kind of hanging in the middle, and then there's a bunch of salmon that aren't on the wall, that are just kind of suspended from the ceiling, kind of just migrating you, or just kind of guiding you through the exhibit. And I knew that big wall being 50 feet long, I really I put 43 salmon on there, and that's quite a big number. And the thing about having a show at a museum like that is it kind of gives you the ability to think outside the pedestal a little bit, and kind of get into kind of creating an environment more. And they're looking for more. I mean, there's just more of a ability to have a narrative, or to have a story, and kind of create a space that represents your work and your vision. And being able to have that wall like that, I mean, it just we can look at it on the computer screen, or pictures are great because it kind of documents it in a way that is permanent. But just being able to take in something that you really have to turn your whole head to see is I like that the approach to displaying work like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. These are gorgeous pieces. I love the variety of color too that they represent. It's really cool. Thank you for sharing.
So in that picture, you can see the one on the very far right. That's the tip of the spear, or the chief of the salmon people, and that's the one. Those first couple ones are the ones that escape in the schwalla every time. And when they would catch the salmon, they would stop fishing. After the first catch, they would stop and potlatch for a week, and then they'd let a week worth of salmon go by before they actually start fishing. There's one in there it's hard to see, but in this picture that you have, there's one that has an eye, and there's definitely a progression as I've been making them, the way they change. And I kind of, just like Preston was alluding to earlier, you know, a lot of the original poles or the art, a lot of it's like black and white or red and black, and, you know, maybe accents of yellow or turquoise or something. But when there's, you know, I've got 400 to 500 glass colors to use, I'm just jam them all in there. I kind of like the end result like that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
My final question for you all is, I mean, you all have, first of all, congratulations. This is beautiful, beautiful work. And thank you for being a part of Luminosity and showcasing your work here at Stonington. My last question for you is for aspiring artists. Do you have any advice for those who are interested in glass art and want to own their craft? If you can, you know, take us back to when you started and things that you wish you knew that you know now, could you share any advice for those folks?
I started as a production glassblower the same way Dan did too. And we both started at the same place a couple of years later. But it really takes a lot of time to get good at what to get good at anything. Glass blowing is obviously no exception. There was a period of time where I worked, 6-7 days a week for years, and helping other people make work, and then in turn they would help me make work. And so, you have to have that time dedication to get good at doing this process. And, one thing leads to another. So I think we're, it's about perseverance and dedication, dedicating your time and volunteering your time, so that you can, get with other people and learn from them. That's one of the most valuable things that you can do, is work with other people to gain some insight to how to do this stuff. So I don't know, after, getting close to 40 years for me. So it's like, I kind of forget about the whole journey to get here. But it is a lot of hard work, but it's fun when you're doing it. It's there's always something to learn, and that's the exciting part.
Definitely. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think I would just echo Preston, time. So there's a lot to that 10,000 hours kind of concept of just building muscle memory, being in a glass shop. Doesn't matter if you're the big head honcho, you need to just like repetition, do it again and again and again, and until you know how the glass moves when it's hot and when it's cold, and all of those things. And that's purely technical standpoint. I think another big thing too is that the glass is so much teamwork oriented. So if you're a hard worker and you have a good attitude, that goes without saying, I guess, for most things, but especially in glass, it's going to be appreciated. And it's a great way to, like Preston was saying, I worked for free for several years, happy to open doors and torch or do whatever it was, as long as I was there watching and seeing what was going on. And it's just a way to learn. If you can assist someone who you look up to, or who's have some sort of mentorship, then man, there's no better way to do it than that. And the best part about that too is you don't end up with a student loan. So I think hard work and dedication is, can't say enough for those two things. So
awesome.
Yeah, I would third that, I guess. There's no shortage of, I feel like we all sort of learned in that apprenticeship style, and we stand on the shoulders of people that figured this out long before us. And there's a history going back thousands of years in glass, which is so cool, which I really like, this marriage, or this crossroads of indigenous design and ideas, being used in this pretty contemporary material with a long history. What would I say? I would say, 10,000 hours, or it's a lot like being a musician. It takes 5 years before anybody even wants to go to your recital, maybe, or something. You gotta spend 5 to 10 years just to kind of figure out the rhythm of it. And when I was young, I could donate my time, which is something that's hard to do when you're further down the road. But that whole apprenticeship thing is real, and you learn from the graciousness of wise teachers, and it weeds out the people that are afraid to work hard. There's nobody in this industry that doesn't show up on time. It's just kind of the way that it is. I'd say don't burn your bridges. You never know who you're going to be working for in the future, or that sort of thing. And I had to learn that the hard way. It's just one of those things. It's be a good student. Get the cotton out of your ears and jam it in your mouth, and but there's a lot of things like that. I'd say that just don't give up. If it wasn't challenging, we wouldn't be entertained. There's like, if glass didn't break, it wouldn't be worth anything. It's difficult, and I think that we all you learn to accept that, and it kind of keeps us motivated to try new things and kind of find new work as working in glass. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Thank you. That's really
absolutely.
all really great advice, and we'll definitely be sharing it with folks